Just cast your mind back. Not a few years, but a mere 500 years. Now I know that might seem like a long time to you, but really, 500 years, not that long ago. And just think, 500 years ago, there was not a single chili used in Indian cooking. No chilies used in African cooking. Not a single chili consumed in Thailand. No sweet paprika in Hungary. Hard to believe, isn't it? But it's true. And that's because chilies were not known to the rest of the world until the Spaniards discovered the Americas. And when they discovered the Americas and they discovered chili, they literally realised they were onto something hot. Because here was a spice that people could have no matter what their socioeconomic condition was. The Spanish soon discovered, when they found these plants and took them back to monasteries in Spain and propagated them, they had a plant that was easy to grow, it was prolific, it would grow in a wide range of climatic conditions, and it had the heat that the hitherto very expensive pepper was one of the only other spices that actually had heat that could be used in cooking. So, with chilies, here was something that was very special. The Spaniards were also going on lots of voyages of discovery of their own, and when they were going to many different parts of the world, they actually took chili plants with them. Now, if you have ever grown chilies, you will know that birds love them. Just as the pods are getting ripe and ready to pick, thump, the birds pinch them and carry them away. And of course, when they do this, they spread the seeds in their droppings. So in all the different countries that chilies were taken to, the seeds were spread, and within not much more than a century, they literally spread like wildfire and were growing everywhere. The other fascinating thing about chilies is that they hybridise very rapidly. And depending upon the different soil and climatic conditions, different hybrids of chilies developed. So what happened in the north of Europe, you had all the sweet paprikas developing. And because the population that lived there tended to have a preference for those sweet paprika flavour profiles, those were the varieties that they continued to propagate and encourage. In Spain, there were paprikas that were also very similar, but they weren't quite as sweet as the Hungarian paprikas. They were a little sharper and sometimes a little hotter. So all of the different varieties of that family that grow in Spain had a different profile again. Similarly for India. And as we know, the Indians have a great predilection for heat, and so all of the hot chilies were encouraged. And you ended up with lots of different varieties of very hot chilies growing in India. Then, all around the world, chilies became so popular that they really tended to outstrip pepper in terms of total production. We see a lot of chilies are consumed fresh as well as dried. I often say to people, when you're using chilies, think of the difference between a fresh chili and a dried chili as like the difference between a fresh tomato and a sun-dried tomato. Very different in flavour profiles. A fresh chili tastes very capsicum-like, and it has a beautiful, clean, fresh chili heat. When a chili is dried, you get lots of sugars forming and you get extremely complex flavour notes developing. So a dried chili is far more complex in flavour profile than a fresh one. Fresh chilies are best used in dishes that are not being cooked for very long, or dishes that are not being cooked at all. So if you're putting some freshly julienned chili into a Thai salad, or you're putting it through a stir fry, or maybe an Asian soup that's not cooking for long, use fresh chili. But if you're making a curry, or you're making a spaghetti bolognese and you want the bolognese sauce to have some chili in it, always use the dried chili because you'll benefit from that more robust flavour profile. Now, chilies get their heat from a substance that is called capsaicin, and capsaicin exists mostly in the seeds and the seed-bearing placenta in a chili. And also, as a very basic rule of thumb, the size of a chili is a good indication of its heat level, and usually the smaller the chili, the hotter it is. And that's because in a small chili, the ratio of seeds and seed-bearing flesh to the outer flesh of the chili is higher in a little chili. And then as the chili gets bigger, that ratio of flesh becomes greater and the chili is usually not so hot. There are so many different varieties these days, it can sometimes be hard to tell, and you can even get different chilies that look almost, exactly the same, but they've come from different bushes and they'll have different heat levels. So it's always a good idea when using chili to only start off with a fairly small amount, and you can always add more as you go on. Some dried chilies like these, long chilies, if you smell them, you'll notice that they've got a beautiful full-bodied flavour profile, quite delicious. And a medium-sized chili like this, which is often referred to as a long chili, chilies like that are usually around about 6 or 7 on a heat scale of 1 to 10. There are also some other interesting looking chilies, which quite frankly look a little bit dodgy when you first view them. These dark chilies here are ancho chilies. And there's a few other Mexican chilies such as pasilla and mulatto, which are dark like this. What you notice with these chilies, when you smell them, is that the notes that you inhale are very like raisins, sultanas, currants, leather, all sorts of interesting profiles. And on a scale of 1 to 10, these dark Mexican chilies would only be about 3. So they're quite mild and they add a beautiful, robust fruitiness to food. I've even tasted these sliced very finely and put with cheese on biscuits, put with apple, and you can even use chili in ice cream, but only a small amount. But it's amazing how well the flavour will complement it. You get kinds of chilies from India, such as the Kashmiri chili, which is a very red chili, gives a beautiful colour to food and vibrancy. And then there's another chili from South America, which is a smoked jalapeno. And this particular variety is called a chipotle. And a chipotle chili has the most beautiful smoky flavour with a mild heat. And you know who some of our best customers are for these? Vegetarians. Because if they're making a vegetable soup or a pea soup, they're not going to be able to put ham in it to give it its flavour. So what you do, you put in a chipotle chili and you get that beautiful smoky ham type flavour. Also goes wonderfully in pumpkin soup. Always use chilies fairly sparingly. You can always add more if you need more, but if you've added too much, it's very hard to counteract that extra heat. If you do find you've put too much chili in a dish, about the only 2 things you can do is either increase all the quantities of the other ingredients so you've watered it down, but the other thing that will work quite well is if you've used fresh chilies, put in freshly chopped capsicum. Because remember, capsicum is a member of the same family as chili. And if you put in freshly chopped capsicum, it will help to round out the flavour and take back some of the heat. If it's a curry or something you've used a chili powder in, or dried chilies, then add some sweet paprika. And again, the sweet paprika will work with the chili and it will tend to just tone it down a little bit and make it not quite so excessive. And if you're at a restaurant or a friend's place and you've been served up a chili dish and you're actually in pain, don't reach for the glass of water. Water will actually make the heat worse. It'll be like putting water on an oil fire. The best way to counter the heat in chili is to have something like yogurt or milk or even a spoonful of sugar will take away that initial heat. But when you've used chili in cooking, the best thing about it is the flavour profile that it gives. It gives a lovely heat, but that beautiful capsicum-like profile is all part of what we're looking for. People may ask you, what's the difference between green chili and red chili? The main difference is simply in the flavour profile. And a green chili will taste very much like a green capsicum as far as flavour goes. A red chili will taste very much like a red capsicum because it's riper and sweeter. And that is the main difference. Believe it or not, there's not a large difference in the heat level. So when it comes to using chilies, I always say, don't be frightened of them. Just use a small amount, and then as you start to get a feel for the flavour, you can use a little bit more.